Our entire Sunday morning broadcast fits behind that curtain. Let's go take a look at it. Ta-da! So this right here has our entire broadcast setup on one mobile cart. We leave it here behind this curtain in our auditorium because we don't actually have church in our auditorium on a Sunday morning. Instead, we rent the theater next door. So everything that we have has to be portable and be able to be packed up, set up, torn down very quickly. So we built this bad boy. And today I'm gonna show you every single thing that's on it, how it all connects, and how we use it on a Sunday morning. So let's go. First things first though, we gotta get it out from behind this curtain into some better light so that you can actually see what I'm doing. So let's do that. Just a quick side note too, if you guys are interested in any of this gear that I'm gonna talk about in this video, it is all linked down below at my kit.co. So go ahead and click that link and you'll see all the gear mentioned here as well as links to buy it. If you buy something, I get a small kickback at no extra charge to you. So it'd be super helpful and I really appreciate it. So anyway, let's get back to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a closer look at what's going on here. So first of all, you notice that things are loaded up pretty full on this here cart, and that's because we want to keep everything as compact as possible behind that curtain so that it doesn't take up that much room throughout the week, and we can use the rest of that curtain space to store some more things. So real quick, this is actually our auditorium that we don't use on Sunday mornings. Again, we use a theater that's next door. So everything on this cart is what we use for our broadcast, plus if you guys are familiar with it, we also have this set of rails right here that we use for our dolly cam. Check the link up in the top if you're interested in how we made and used that. This is all just made out of 2x4s and plywood, and we've been using it for a couple years. It's not the prettiest looking thing, but it gets the job done. So on a Sunday morning, we actually take this and we wheel it through those doors, through another set of doors, into the theater next door. And then we unload it and get everything set up. So let's take a look at everything that's on here that we have to unload. Okay, so first we basically just have to get everything off the top of the cart. So that's gonna start with just taking this tripod off that we use for one of our cameras. Next up over here, we actually have our dolly for our dolly cam. Like I said, the rails are over there. They kind of sit on the floor. That's the only piece that doesn't actually fit on this cart because how would you fit 10-foot PVC onto a 4-foot cart or whatever. But anyway, we go ahead and we take this dolly, and normally this will just go on our rails that we set up in our auditorium. So the next thing here that you'll notice is actually just some squeeze clamps right here. So these are actually what we use to attach the dolly rails to the railing in the theater that we meet in. They've got these nice little railings right in front of each section, and so it's an easy way to actually just set up our dolly and the rails for it. So they just kind of clamp on here to the side of the cart, and then when we get over there on a Sunday morning, we just kind of pull them off, and then we will just actually set them up to hold our rails on. Next up, in this little tripod bay area, we have our wireless receivers for our stage cams. So these are Teradek Ace 500s. I'll try to grab the focus there. And strapped to it, we have HDMI to SDI converters. These are all on these Amazon Basics light stands. So we pull one of these out. Let me set this camera down. All we have to do is we take these up on the stage, we pull them down like that, and we plug this end of the extension cord into the wall. So these receivers, then we run an SDI cable all the way back to this guy that's gonna be set up in the back of the room. So everything on here is kind of set up, ready to go. That way we don't have to actually set up and run all these cables every single week. So again, we have 2 of these because we have 2 wireless cameras on our stage. So we'll set those aside. Next up in here, we actually have a table. Just a small folding table that we use to set cameras and headsets and all other sorts of things on. You know, everything fits in this cart, but it doesn't mean everything has to fit on the cart when we actually get over there. And finally, the last thing in this little section is a tripod that we use for camera 1 set up in the very back of the room. Now, this is one of my favorite parts of the cart. You know, this area isn't actually that huge to be able to set up on, so we put some hinges into this little guy, and this little shelf swings out to give us, you know, a good 2 more feet on our work surface here. This really helps because we're going to set up our actual switcher and then a laptop to monitor the stream, and an iPad for mixing audio. But okay, let's get back into this. So what else do we have on the top here? Well, right over here, we actually have our cables that are already set up for our audio, and they just kind of stay here ready to go. So let's grab our audio mixer. We leave that down in here. So what happens here is we actually have a left and right XLR, and these are actually, I'll show you the other ends in a second, but these will actually plug into the soundboard in the theater that we meet in. We use their audio setup. So we plug those into this little mixer here. Then these two guys, left and right, plug into the stereo output of this mixer. The other ends of those go into our ATEM constellation, which I will show you in just a second. So why do we actually have this mixer here? And the answer is kind of simple, but also kind of dumb. It's that there's not really a good way to monitor audio on the ATEM constellation. So like I said, we're getting audio from our front of house board. We actually have a separate post-fader bus mix that comes out of that and comes over here. But then how do we actually listen to what that mix sounds like? Obviously our front of house guy can, because he has headphones plugged into the soundboard. But if we're back here with the stream, there's no good way to monitor the audio that's getting into it. So we decided to put this little mixer in line where we can set up some headphones and actually monitor what's going on in the stream at any given time. That also allows us to easily adjust the volume and do a little bit of leveling before it gets to the constellation in case what we're getting out of the soundboard isn't quite where we want it. It's maybe a little bit easier to adjust it here rather than on the board. Okay, so continuing on this tour of the top of the cart, we have a Stream Deck. You've seen these before. We use this to actually switch all of our video inputs and run some macros and basically run the entire show from this Stream Deck. Moving right along, obviously we have the giant TV. This is what we use for our multi-view, and it will have all of our cameras on it, and this is what we switch from. Secondly, we have this smaller computer monitor that's on this arm. It swings out like so. It's on a little monitor arm, and then it sits right there. So this guy is for our multi-view for our ATEM Mini, which again, I will show you in just a second. But basically, we mix and switch with the ATEM constellation, the output of which feeds our ATEM Mini, which is then what actually ends up going to the internet and feeding the world with our services. Moving right along, we have a little old Sony a6000 here. This actually clamps up here and is my little director cam that I use for social media. It's not actually important to the stream, but it's there. Next up, we have our comms. This is the EarTech Ultralight Hub. And so this is the guy that actually will be kind of the center point for all of our comms for a Sunday morning. And we actually have a cable running out of that into our ATEM Mini so that we can record our comms after the fact. That way I can mix them with our multi-view and use them there. And finally, we actually have an old 2017 MacBook Pro here. And this is what's going to run ATEM software control and also have YouTube open so that we can start and stop our stream and kind of monitor things there as well. The other thing that you'll see up here up top is actually just our camera batteries. We have a couple of chargers here that will charge them throughout the week and then also make sure to charge them on a Sunday morning so that they're always charged and ready to go. And a nice little outlet guy here. That way we can plug a couple of things in, and that was some crazy camera work, but you get the point. Now it's time to move on to the shelves. So we need a little bit more light for this though, so I'm going to plug something in and be back. All right, look at that. Everything's lit up now. We also have these nice little lights on our shelves so that we can actually see what's going on there. So let's kind of dig into what's on these shelves and explore the rest of this cart here. All right, so first up is actually probably the most boring shelf here. It's just a few drawers that have odds and ends, you know, like some extra low cables, adapters, SD cards if we ever use those, tools, scissors, hard drive, remote for the TV, you know, the little random things that you need, but never really have a good place to put them. Next, let's move to this top shelf, which actually has kind of the majority of our gear. So right there, we have the brains of it all, which is our ATEM Constellation HD 2ME, whatever that name is. So this is the guy that actually runs to this main multi-view and what we do all of our main switching on. So all of our cameras will eventually come and plug into this guy, and this is what controls our show. Then right above that, we actually have the ATEM Mini Pro ISO. So like I said, that's the one that will be on this monitor here that we actually end up sending out to the internet for our stream and actually ISO recording our program feed and a clean feed in our multi-view. So that guy does a lot of heavy lifting. Over here on the right side, we have just a cheap little TP-Link network switch. The theater that we meet in has a network drop, so we have one cable that goes and plugs into that. And then after that, everything comes out of this network switch and runs to all the different devices that are on this cart just to make sure that everything's on the same network so that we can easily talk to everything else. We've got just a couple of HDMI to SDI adapters in here just to make sure that everything can plug into everything else. And then finally, right back there, if you can kind of see it, is actually a Raspberry Pi, which is just a tiny microcomputer. And that little guy is actually running Companion. That way, whenever we start up everything on this cart, Companion just starts up and is ready to roll with everything that we need, that we can use the Stream Deck to actually switch things and get everything moving with that. Now, we could run all of that on that MacBook Pro that we have sitting up here, but I kind of like the idea that it's just something that starts up and I don't even have to think about the fact that Companion is running. It just runs and we never have any problems with it. So if you're wondering, hey, I don't have a computer to run Companion on, get yourself a little Raspberry Pi. They're what, like 50 bucks? It's awesome. And then finally, the last couple of things on this shelf, we have the batteries for our EarTech headsets, V-mount batteries for powering our cameras, and a couple of Belkin power strips that everything plugs into. And before you say it, yes, I know we should probably have power conditioners and do these things more correctly, but here we are. It's been a few years and nothing has happened. Terrible excuse, but that's what we're going with. Anyway, down onto the next shelf, which has seen better days and has been more full in certain times than others, but we'll take a look. Right here, we actually have our case of headsets. So if we open this guy up with one hand, it's kind of tough. Here's all of our EarTech headsets, and they are all labeled with which camera they are for. That way, on a Sunday morning, people know what camera they're running. They come in, they grab their headset, they're ready to go. Honestly, this is the shelf of junk. We have a little basket here. We had an attempt at organization, but here we are. We have one other wired headset, some gaff tape, extra headphones, some batteries, lens caps, you know, the usual. Right here we have earplugs. Great thing for all of your camera ops to have, especially the ones that are on the stage. That way they don't go deaf and they can hear you a little bit better. Little tool set, a couple extra cables, and actually one of my favorite little tools. This is an SDI, I don't even know what you call it, plugger inner. Basically, if you're struggling with some of your SDI ports because they're in tight spaces, this little guy goes around the end of the connector and you just kind of screw it on. It's pretty awesome. These guys are super cheap on Amazon. The link is in the description below if you want to buy one. Would love that. Anyway. And yeah, that's a bunch of garbage that I need to get rid of. But look at these nice LED strips so we can see everything that's going on in here and always know where everything is. Moving right along. Right here. This is where all of our SDI cables go. They're all nicely wrapped because I'm a stickler about that. Tied up with some bongo ties. Look at that. Look at those guys. Some of these are really long runs because we have to run them a long way. But keep them nicely wrapped and they fit right in here. This used to actually have a desktop PC in it, which is why it's kind of a weird shape, but fits all of our cables, which is awesome. And finally, the last shelf, which is actually more like a drawer, but kind of a shelf. Look, it's all of our cameras, you know, the thing you actually need for a live stream. So this little guy is a drawer with a little bit of padding in it, has all of our cameras other than, you know, the one that was on the dolly that we use for that. So the cool thing about this drawer is that it will actually pull all the way out and then we flip it upside down to use it as a step stool for our main follow cam operator to get him a little bit higher in the air. So let me show you what I mean. Ta-da! So anyway, we take all the cameras out, pull this guy out, flip it upside down, and it's a nice platform for our follow cam operator to stand on. But I'm sure you guys actually want to see what the cameras are that we use, how they're set up, and we will get to that at the end. So that's the main front of this entire cart. It's, you know, like I said, it's not pretty, but it's pretty functional. So we like that. Oh, now that everything's powered on, you can kind of see, cool, look at that. Companion on the Stream Deck set up to actually switch all of our cameras. All right, so that's the front. Look at that TV, whoops. Let's go ahead and look at the back. Now the back is where it gets kind of ugly, as if the front wasn't ugly already. So one thing is we've got some nice power coming off of here, and then it plugs into the wall. So yeah, that's where all of our power comes from. Second, remember I talked about how we get our sound from the soundboard. Well, we do that with this bundle of cables right here that are kind of loomed together, kind of not exactly. But if you look at the end here, these all run into the tech booth that's actually over in the theater. And on here, we have two XLRs that actually, well, let's get this focused. We have two XLRs that go left and right out of the soundboard and end up getting routed all the way up to this little guy that I talked about earlier. We have an HDMI cable that goes to our ProPresenter computer that sits in the soundboard. We run one single instance of ProPresenter, it feeds our live stream, and it feeds our in-house slides. And then finally, we also have an Ethernet cable here, and this is what goes into the network switch over there. Now remember, I said that all of that stuff comes in here into our network switch, but what I didn't mention was this guy here. Again, a nice little TP-Link, I think? Yeah, TP-Link Wi-Fi router. Really cheap, not super great or anything, but this guy creates a nice little isolated Wi-Fi network, so that way anything that's on Wi-Fi for our production can talk to each other and not have to worry about using the network that's over in the other building. This has a few different advantages, which I've talked about in a video on my channel, but essentially it means that we can set this card up over here in our building, and as long as we plug that network cable into something that has access to the internet, everything else will actually be on an isolated network that doesn't change names, won't change IP addresses, and everything will just connect to automatically, which is super helpful because it means we can set this up here, we can set it up across the room, and we never have to do any network configuration because we've already done it. So, great idea to have an isolated network for your broadcast. Anyway, we just have kind of a mess of cables that's over here because why wouldn't you? Got to cable manage somehow, right? And then, you know, another nice little HDMI adapter. But in this little cutout here, we actually have access to the back of our ATEM constellation. This is where all the cameras will eventually plug in via SDI. The ATEM constellation, you know, is great. It's got tons of inputs and outputs. It's awesome. Anyway, we run a multi-view output through some adapters up into this guy right here, and then some other outputs into the back of our ATEM Mini. Now, I never want to have to change anything on that ATEM Mini because it's kind of a pain and you can't really even see it. So hopefully nothing ever goes wrong with that. Okay, so that is basically the entire cart as it stands, as it works. Now, you know, some of these things are not necessarily set up in the most efficient ways, and realistically, that's because things about this have changed a lot over the years. We used to have a PC that was running vMix. We used to only have like 2 cameras, you know? So as we have progressed in things, our needs have evolved and this has evolved with it. I don't think I can fit all that much more stuff on it. So hopefully we don't change that much more, or I can get rid of some stuff in the meantime, or I can just build a new one because that's awesome. This whole thing, I think, costs about $100. So as you can tell, it's really fine craftsmanship. I'm not necessarily recommending you do something exactly like this, but it can be a cheap way to get something that works. Speaking of a cheap way to get something that works, if you're brand new to live streaming or you're not even sure if you want to live stream your church services, I'm gonna have a course that's gonna teach you all of the super basic things about live streaming that you just don't know because you've never done it. That course is gonna come out real soon and it's probably gonna be pretty cheap. So if you're interested, go ahead and use the link down in the description, sign up for notifications. You will get an email when that course is coming out and how you can sign up for it. So don't miss that. Now, finally, let's take a look at our cameras because I know you're all interested in that because I'm interested in that and I am the same as you, kind of, not really, but let's do it. All right, let's grab camera 4 right here and we'll set it up here. So cameras, we're gonna go in kind of a backwards order here, but you know, bear with me. Cameras 3 and 4 are our wireless cameras that sit on the stage. They are rigged out about the same way, so I'll kind of just look at one of these. First off, we have the Panasonic Lumix G85. These cameras are kind of a beast for the price, especially if you buy them used. I think used, you can get one of these bodies for $300 or $400, which is awesome. Got a nice little micro HDMI right here. Talk about the worst port of all time. Super fragile, so try not to break those. Anyways, we've then got a Viltrox lens adapter, which allows us to adapt these lenses because traditionally the G85 is actually just a micro four thirds sensor and lens mount, so you're a little bit limited in the lenses that you can use. But we use this little lens adapter to adapt to EF, and then we have a Sigma 18-35 lens on this guy. This is a fantastic lens. You can get them used again for like 500 bucks or so. Fantastic for the price. They look beautiful. So if you've got an EF mount camera or the ability to adapt to EF, if you don't, it's a great option. Anyway, then we have just some really super generic camera rigging cage on this guy. It's not amazing, I don't love it, but it gets the job done. On the top, we've got a nice little top handle with a cheap Feel World 5-inch monitor. I would not trust this monitor for color accuracy, but it is a lot better than using the tiny monitor built into the camera when you're just trying to pull focus with it. We basically set and forget those settings, so we don't need to adjust them on the fly based on color all that much. Then, right back here, we've got some rails running off the bottom of that camera there to this V-mount battery plate. Remember these batteries we had down here before? Great, let's pull one of those off the charger and we'll snap it right onto here. Boom, that also helps balance the camera a little bit more. So this V-mount battery plate has a few handy dandy little things. One, it's got some USB outputs, so you can power things that can take a USB cable to power them. So that's awesome. Second up, we've got some nice barrel jacks for some other common DC power output values, 5, 8, 12, 15. Awesome. So this guy will last forever. I mean, we have one service that we stream on a Sunday morning. This has never died. And honestly, I mean, it's got a few, dots. I don't think I've ever seen it get past 3. So this thing can power all the things that you need on your camera and then some. So if you're not using big V-mount batteries, you probably should be, because they're awesome. Next up on here, remember I said these are wireless cameras and we saw the wireless receivers. So here are the wireless transmitters. It's the Teradek Ace 500. I don't even think you can buy these anymore. I think now it's all the Teradek Ace 750 or something. Anyway, these are great. They're like $1,000, and honestly, the quality and the latency is great for $1,000. Realistically, if you want like a super good, super reliable wireless system, you're spending multiple thousands of dollars. This Ace 500 has been incredible for us. Like nothing else has really hit the mark. We've tried budget options from Hollyland and a few others, and they just really have not worked. But this Ace 500 just keeps on trucking and has never given us any problems. So if you're on the lookout for a budget system for wireless, the Ace 500 is the cheapest, most budget thing I would go for. Speaking of cheap and budget, look at how it's mounted to this. We just have some VHB tape holding it to this battery plate. That's really dumb because it has some 1/4-20 threads on the bottom, but we like to keep this thing nice and compact and the signal is still fine. So again, do as I say, not as I do. Probably don't do that. We do our best to cable manage everything so that they don't really get in the way. And so a camera op could just walk up, pick this up, run this camera just like this. It's awesome. Now, the one final thing that's on this camera that you may have noticed, but probably didn't, is right up here. This little itty bitty LED sticking out the top of the camera that my camera won't even focus on. Now that guy is our tally light. So I have a whole video about tally lights and how I made these. And honestly, if you haven't watched it, you need to stop this and go watch it right now. A tally light is something that turns red when the camera operator is live and turns green when they're in preview and is off otherwise. These little guys work over Wi-Fi. They cost about $5 to make. Requires a tiny bit of soldering and like the ability to copy and paste code into a file. And otherwise, they're super easy and they work flawlessly. We've never had a problem with these. We have one on every single one of our cameras. And it just really gives some extra confidence to the camera op as they're running the camera to know if they're live or not. So highly recommend checking out that video. I'll have it linked up here. Go check it out. One of my most viewed videos and honestly just so worth it, so worth it. But if you want to see what that actually looks like, it's just this tiny little chip there. Again, some gaff tape and Velcro actually to the back of the monitor because who needs real rigging, right? So awesome. That is one of our wireless cameras. And again, camera 3 and camera 4 are exactly the same. So we're gonna set that aside now. Now we're going to get into camera 1, which is our largest camera by far. So bear with me as I try to pick this up one-handed. Probably a really stupid thing to do, but here we go. All right, camera 1, bit of a chungus here. So this one is the only camera that's actually a different body. It is the Panasonic G7 instead of G85. Honestly, the only reason is because I could get it cheaper than the G85. And the biggest difference between them is that this one doesn't have in-body stabilization, which I should have mentioned before. Stabilization on the G85 is pretty incredible, honestly. Again, for a handheld camera, awesome to have that. So the G7 doesn't have it, but it's cheaper, and this camera's always on a tripod, so we don't need it. But if you take a look at this camera, it's pretty similar to the other one. Again, another Viltrox lens adapter. Now, you know, Metabones makes theirs, and they're like 2 or 3 times the price. I don't even remember. I've never used one, so I can't speak to it, but the quality on these seems to be fine, so I haven't really felt the need to spend extra on those. Your mileage may vary. Now, there's actually 2 types of these lens adapters as I am getting to this. One just adapts the lens. The other one is what's known as a speed booster, which will kind of adjust the focal range of the lens and also give you some extra stops of aperture control. I can't quote the numbers to you. There's some great articles online that'll really do the math for you, but just know that they're different and they'll do kind of different things, but kind of similar things. They'll both let you attach a new lens to it though, so just keep your eye out for that. Now, speaking of lenses, the lens that we have on here is the Sigma 150 to 600. This thing is massive. And let's fully extend it so you can truly appreciate how massive this lens actually is. By no means is this the best, fastest, sharpest lens in the world. I mean, if we look at it, it's an f5 to 6.3, so it's not the fastest. But when you're talking about using it at 500, 600 mil, realistically, focusing on anything that's a lower aperture than that is kind of impossible. So we don't really mind. If you look at the rest of the rig, very, very similar with this same kind of generic camera rig. Same monitor, kind of on the side this time though, because the operator will actually be standing beside this. And then huge tripod plate, just to make sure we're balancing that out. Same V-mount plate that we'll attach a V-mount battery to. Same tally light on the monitor. The other big difference here is because this camera is stationary, it's not wireless. We wire it in. If your cameras don't need to be wireless, don't make them wireless. It's really great to be able to plug them directly in and not be worrying about a transmitter. So instead, we've got this little HDMI to SDI adapter. HDMI goes into it, SDI comes out of it, and gets run across the floor back to our cart and plugged in the back. Again, look at that, held onto this battery plate with VHB tape. Again, if it works, it's not dumb, right? Anyway, this camera, again, pretty similar setup, just different lens because of what we need it for. We set it up in the very back of the room, and it gets a really tight shot of our pastor or the leading vocalist or whoever is kind of the focus main subject of the moment. So that long lens is kind of what we need. And finally, camera 2, which is the one on the dolly, which again, I've got a whole video on, but we'll take a look at the camera itself as I sit down here to look at it. Guess what camera is? Yeah, that's right. It's a Panasonic G85. And this is the only one that doesn't have an EF lens adapter on it. Instead, we're using a Lumix 14 to 140. And honestly, it's because it gives us such an amazing focal range to use when it's on the dolly. It can go super wide. It can go in pretty tight to like background vocalists that are helping lead songs and just kind of cover so many different things. So this guy is just on a tripod head that we ripped off of one of our old tripods because it used to just be on a tripod. Same monitor, same tally light taped up here, same V-mount battery plate here, same SDI adapter because this is another wired camera. It doesn't need to be wireless. It would maybe be helpful because then I wouldn't have to run a cable and tape it so that people aren't tripping on it. But again, if it doesn't need to be wireless, probably don't make it wireless. It's just not worth the hassle. But other than that, you know, it's we're trying to keep our cameras all pretty much the same, pretty similar at least, just to make sure that we can kind of mix and match things if we need to. We haven't really needed to. We haven't really changed these cameras in all that long, but it gives us the flexibility to do that if we need it. And it makes sure that people who train on one camera know how to use all the other cameras, at least from a technical standpoint on the cameras themselves, which is super helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, every single piece of gear here is linked down in the description where to buy it. If you do purchase something through one of those links, it helps me out a little bit. I get a kickback, but it doesn't cost any more for you. So if you need to buy anything, use those links. And actually, even if you don't need to buy those things, but you need to buy, you know, I don't know, whatever you buy on Amazon, batteries, toilet paper, snacks, diapers for your baby, go ahead and use one of those links too, because I still get a kickback just from taking you there. So go ahead and click that. All right, y'all. Anyway, that is every single piece of gear that we use on a Sunday morning for our live streams. And again, it all lives on this cart. It all kind of transforms out of it when it's time to go on a Sunday morning. And then it all packs back in and goes back behind that curtain to live there for the week, charge our batteries, and be ready to get pulled out the next week. If you're interested in actually seeing how all of that happens on a Sunday morning, where everything goes, check out my Instagram. I actually have a video of me unloading this whole thing on a Sunday morning and what that looks like. Or let me know if you want to see a longer video on that. Maybe I'll do that, but I'd have to get here at like 4 a.m. and I don't know if I really want to do that. So we'll see. We'll see about that one. Anyway, let me know what you think. Obviously, like I said, this is not the best setup in the world, but it's a setup that works for us. It's a setup that is easy week in and week out to set up and tear down, transport, whatever. And it's been one that's been pretty cheap. I don't have the exact tally number, but those of you who you know, have a calculator and have been paying attention can probably tally it up. But we bought a lot of this stuff used, some of it new. I think probably total we spent about $15,000 on this whole thing over the course of, you know, 4.5 years, which is not crazy if you know anything about the world of video. So if you like this video, go ahead and subscribe. I'm always trying to post new content that's helpful for you guys as you're leading your live streams, and it would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to see those. Until next time.